The United States has given a very harsh response to Putin's out-of-line move. When Putin, who sent the Russian Navy into U.S. territorial waters to intimidate the U.S., realized his mistake, it was too late for everything. Putin's step, which incredibly increased the tension in the world, was the last straw for the United States. The Russian Navy, which was blockaded by American F-35 fighter jets, has experienced a nightmare. The Ukrainian army, which has the opportunity to gather all the attention in U.S. territorial waters, has signed a mind-boggling operation. With this operation, which completely changed the balances in the war, the Ukrainian army has dealt a very heavy blow to Putin. Numerous world states that have been mobilizing for the independence of Ukraine since the beginning of the war continued to send support packages to further strengthen the inventory of the Ukrainian army. The support provided by the United States, which decrees the world politics among these countries, for the Ukrainian army ensured that the occupying Russian forces suffered very heavy defeats. In the face of such pressure on Ukraine, Putin, who had all his plans disrupted, wanted to completely end the support provided by the United States. Putin, who attracted the reaction of the whole world with his aggressive and expansionist policies throughout the occupation of Ukraine, wanted to make an unthinkable move. But Putin, who made a huge mistake by underestimating the United States, paid the price for this mistake very heavily. A large number of Russian warships belonging to the Russian Navy have sailed into U.S. territorial waters on Putin's orders. Putin, who wants the Russian Navy not to enter U.S. territorial waters and to wait at the borderline, made it an excuse that exercises will be held in the region. After a very short time, when it became clear that this exercise was completely unfounded, the United States took action. After the Russian Navy was spotted very close to U.S. territorial waters, the Pentagon held talks with the U.S. Air Force to prevent a border violation. On top of this, a large number of F-35 model fighter jets left their hangars and completely blockaded the Russian Navy located in U.S. territorial waters. During this process, which Putin described as an exercise, some shots fired from Russian warships entered U.S. territorial waters, which brought the tension in the region to an irrepressible level. Ankan, not content with this, the fact that a Russian submarine ship directly violated the border on the orders of Putin further complicated everything. F-35 fighter jets, which took action on the instructions of U.S. President Joe Biden, fired harassment shots near the Russian Navy. The Russian Navy, which until this moment thought that the United States would not respond at all, was surprised at what it suffered in the face of pressure from the F-35s. The Ukrainian army, which completely turned the developments in the territorial waters of the United States, to which the attention of the whole world was directed, has prepared an ingenious plan. This operation, organized by the Ukrainian army on the Bakhmut front, where the war is most intensely felt, was enough to completely upset Putin's plans. The occupying Russian forces, which have been continuing the siege to occupy the Bakhmut region for months, have become unable to do anything in the face of the kilometers-long defense line established by the Ukrainian army on the border. During this process, the Russian army, which began to suffer a large number of casualties against the admirable resistance of Ukrainian soldiers, was losing more than 700 soldiers every day in Bakhmut, according to the statements of Ukrainian officials. For this reason, Putin signed a first order and asked the Russian army in the region to move to a defensive position. It has been proved once again that Putin, who had focused only on the attack until this time, is now quite affected by the bad course brought by the war. While the balances in Bakhmut are turning in favor of the Ukrainian army every day, the tension in U.S. territorial waters has provided a very critical advantage for Ukraine. Taking advantage of Putin's turning his attention to a completely different point, the Ukrainian army has identified the location of a Russian headquarters in Bakhmut as a result of intensive work by the Ukrainian intelligence service. The special team formed by the Ukrainian Special Forces Unit, which immediately took action, reached the headquarters nearby in a short time. However, when the Ukrainian scout troops realized that the Russian headquarters was completely empty, the Ukrainian army achieved one of the easiest victories in its history. The Ukrainian army, which has taken full control of the Russian headquarters, has taken security measures in case of the return of Russian soldiers along with the Leopard 2 and Abrams M1 tanks it has brought to the region. The Ukrainian operation, which was heard all over the world, especially in Russia in a short time, caused a very big crisis in the Kremlin. While he wanted to make a move against the United States, Putin, who had suffered a heavy blow in one of the most critical regions in the war, was surprised at what to do. After Putin's mistake, which was ridiculed all over the world, the Russian Navy in U.S. territorial waters was literally cornered. Putin, whose domination plan in Bakhmut was completely destroyed, ordered the Russian Navy to return to Russia as soon as possible. The biggest reason behind Putin's decision was the steps taken by the Ukrainian army in the Black Sea recently. The Ukrainian army, which has evaluated the long-range HIMARS missile systems contained in the latest support packages sent by the United States extremely effectively, has begun to strike very heavy blows to the occupying Russian forces on the Crimean Peninsula thanks to these missiles. The warships that Putin sent to U.S. territorial waters were guarding the port of Sevastopol, located in Crimea. However, Putin, who is very afraid of leaving Crimea completely defenseless at the moment, ordered all ships to return to Sevastopol as soon as possible. The steps taken by U.S. President Joe Biden, who gave a very critical response to Putin's failed move, in the process management were appreciated all over the world. While Putin wanted to take a step that would increase the tension between the United States and Russia, turning everything against himself, he also failed to end the support for Ukraine. In fact, the U.S. government has become even more outraged by Russia's latest move, announcing that the budget allocated for the Ukrainian army has been increased and new support packages will be sent soon. But the statement made by the G7 countries, which thought that Russian leader Vladimir Putin had now completely crossed the line, was qualified to change everything. The G7 countries, which are already very uncomfortable with Putin's invasion plans, stated that any threat against the United States will be considered directed at all G7 countries. On top of this, the sanctions and embargo imposed on Russia by the G7 countries, which have decided to terminate many trade agreements with Russia, have incredibly increased the crisis in the Russian economy. Putin, who has already suffered a fairly large depreciation of his economy throughout the war, was surprised what to do in the face of the steps taken by Ukraine's allies. But the latest support package announced by Japan, one of the G7 countries, for the Ukrainian army has rewritten the fate of the war. Announcing that they have prepared a financial package of more than $5 billion for the Ukrainian army, the Japanese government stated that Japanese tanks will also be seen on Ukrainian territory in the near future. With the step taken by Japan, which announced that the long-standing negotiations would be accelerated, the Ukrainian army seized a very critical advantage. Despite the fact that Ukraine has found so many allies, Russia has been dragged into a much more isolated position in international politics due to the expansionist and aggressive policies implemented by Putin. Iran and Belarus, which provided support to Putin at the beginning of the war, decided to remain neutral as a result of the interventions of many Western countries, especially the United States. Putin, who wanted to try his last chance with one of the most powerful countries in the Eastern Bloc, such as China, could not provide the support he was looking for in this way either. In this recent period, when the Ukrainian army has reached a much more modern strength, Putin no longer has any trump cards to put forward. The Russian army, which is trying to continue the war with fairly old weapons from the Soviet Union era, is experiencing the worst period in its history under the failed rule of the Putin regime. War analysts predict that if the process continues like this, Russia will not even be able to find bullets to continue the war in the very near future. Besides, in the face of Putin's impulsive and irrational decisions, all the attempts of the occupying Russian forces on the territory of Ukraine, are ending in failure. The comments of war analysts, who claim that if the Ukrainian army makes the most of this advantage, they will be able to completely repel the invading Russian forces, have caused huge repercussions all over the world, and if Russia loses the war, it seems only a matter of time before Putin loses the post of head of state as well.